The stream to fire up all across the fruited plains of the internet. Let me make sure that we're alive and well and we're cracking before we get rocking and rolling here, because we've got a lot to get into. And of course, the live chat is taking place over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, and it looks like we're alive and well. So let's get started, shall we? Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and me to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. That's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. And we're grateful that you are here and with us today, because we've got a lot to get into. We're going to start this show off by talking about Merrick Garland. He's our United States Attorney General, if you're not familiar with him, but he met with the U.S. Capitol Police yesterday. I didn't even realize this because I was busy doing other things, but there was a 6-month anniversary of the insurrection. That was yesterday. We all just kind of forgot about it here on the show, but not in Washington, D.C. Over on Capitol Hill, Merrick Garland went over with the Capitol Police and they took some pictures for their scrapbooks and things. And so we're going to go through that, what happened there. And then what I want to do is something a little bit different, is I actually want to sort of run through some numbers that we have from the City of Scottsdale, which might seem a little bit strange. You're going, well, what does the City of Scottsdale have to do with anything? Well, I'm going to show you, because we have a lot of cases that come through the City of Scottsdale, way more than what the U.S. Attorney's Office is dealing with related to the Capitol Hill insurrection cases. And so I want to just show you kind of what a joke this whole thing really is. And we're going to do that by doing a compare and contrast with an actual city that actually does criminal prosecutions. So that's going to be interesting. We're going to go through all the Capitol Hill stuff. Then, closely related, we're going to transition and talk about Jacob Chansley, because he had a hearing on June 30th that we were waiting for a ruling on. Jacob Chansley, of course, is the Qanon Shaman, the guy in the horns who was arrested for the almost seizing America out from under us. And he's been trying to get out of custody for the last 6 months. 3 times he's tried to get out of custody, and the judge denied it yet again. The final order memorandum came out today, so it's looking like Jacob Chansley, the Qanon Shaman, is going to be in custody for the foreseeable future. We're going to hear from Judge Royce Lamberth over from the D.C. Circuit Court, and so we're going to go through that memo. It is not particularly long. It's about 9 pages. We're going to fly through it, though. And there's some interesting stuff in there. So we're going to see what he says. Why is Jacob Chansley not being allowed out? We're going to get to that and more. Then we're going to finish off with the big news of the day. Of course, Donald Trump was out earlier this morning announcing a class action lawsuit against all of the big tech platforms for some of their, activities, let's say, of throwing him and many other people off of the internet and sort of tilting the scales in favor of their political ideology. So he said that he's going to come out now and actually sue them, named a number of different of the big tech platforms, and also says that he's got the backing of an organization called America First Policy Institute. People like Brooke L. Rollins and Pam Bondi from the AFPI are going to be sort of assisting in this class action lawsuit, and we're going to take a look at that organization. Now, I don't have actually a copy of the class action itself. I have not seen that out yet. Presumably that was all being filed today, and so we'll get copies of that soon enough. But we've got a lot to get into. As I mentioned, if you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is by going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I'm taking a look. We've got a lot of people over there in the chat. Want to give a quick shout out to Jeremy Matrita. He's over there. Chairman of Board is in the house. We have ZZ Boxing Cac. What's up? E. Dantes. TOS Forever is here. We have Ryu Jin and many others. And this is where we're going to take the chats from. And so as we know, we're going to sort of, the format's a little bit differently. So I'm just going to be reading from the chat. And we're going to be getting to those questions here soon enough. Thunder7 says hello. Farmer's Daughter says hello. And we're going to get to some more people there. So if you want to be a part of the show, head on over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. That's where the live chat is taking place. And we're going to check in over there after each different segment. So I want to also invite you, of course, please check out some of the other links down in the description below. We have some other channels that we're working on, a little bit backed up on some of those other channels, but of course, if you need or know anybody in the state of Arizona that needs any criminal representation, I ask you to sort of, maybe consider referring them over to our law firm over here at the R&R Law Group. We love to help good people facing criminal charges navigate through the justice system. Okay, so enough of all of that. Let's get into the news of the day. Attorney General Merrick Garland is sort of the chief attorney for the United States. And so when he puts his efforts into something, everybody should sort of pay attention. Well, yesterday, he actually paused to commemorate a very important 6-month anniversary. Now, 6-month anniversary is sort of one of those things that I kind of go, well, it seems a little bit premature to be celebrating anything or to be commemorating anything. What are we talking about here? Typically, you kind of wait for a year, right? And you know that person that you've dated historically, and they come out and you've been dating for a couple weeks, a couple months, and they say, hey, sweetie, what are we going to do to celebrate our 2-month anniversary? You just go, probably end the relationship, right? Not going to continue on with that thing. So when you start to see stuff like this come out from the federal government, it raises an eyebrow a little bit. But what am I talking about? Well, yesterday was January 6th. It was 6 months after that. It was actually July 6th, which of course is 6 months after January 6th. It was the 6-month anniversary of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The insurrection heard round the world. The most devastating attack in American history. Almost literally seized control of the country because that guy had the podium and the other guy had his feet on Pelosi's desk, and it was just madness all around. There's still a lot of people who are recovering from that travesty, and we wish them well. Now, I want to show you what is going on with the Justice Department, because we've been seeing for a long time that this has been such a catastrophe that it sort of requires that we marshal all of the resources of the entire federal government, like everybody, every single agency, every single available federal officer, every FBI agent, every U.S. attorney, every single person we can get their hands on to go deal with whatever happened that day. And it's a big, big deal. So when we are 6 months out of it now, we got to look back and we got to just sort of pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, nice job, everybody, for doing such a great job protecting America. So Merrick Garland was out yesterday. He came out on Tuesday, July 6th, said a readout from the Attorney General Merrick Garland's meetings commemorating the 6 months since January 6th, right? So it's a big commemoration. I've been saying this here on this channel that they are going to beat this thing to death. If you think this is a big thing, wait until we have the 1-year anniversary. Oh my goodness, you're going to see all sorts of just commemorations and probably big, long documentaries, and you're going to see a lot of tears and people just weeping all over themselves over what happened. And so now we're just getting started. Just 6 months, we're already at it. Attorney General Merrick Garland this afternoon, he met with U.S. Capitol police officers who defended the Capitol on January 6th with the Department of Justice employees who have worked tirelessly to hold accountable those who attacked the Capitol 6 months ago today. So, good for them. They're having their little celebration. The U.S. Capitol Police were very excited about this. They posted this over on Twitter. It says, today, Attorney General Merrick Garland visited one of our roll calls, thanks to our brave U.S. Capitol Police officers, and to give them an update on the January 6 cases. We thank Attorney General Garland, the Justice Department, and all of our law enforcement partners for their support. And so they make this thing like it's a huge, big deal, right? It's a big, big stinking deal that this is, it's going to require all of the efforts of law enforcement. We've seen the FBI on Twitter every day looking for grandma, can't find her for some reason, but they're still going to just keep reminding us about this. We've got, 18 intelligence agencies that couldn't prevent this. And of course, they're having a difficult time prosecuting these cases because there must have been so many of them, right? This was such a big deal. We're going to get there in a second. But first, we'll just make a quick note. They're taking pictures. They're sort of having fun. It was a roll call event. So Merrick Garland, you've got these other officers just sitting back here pretty much bored out of their minds. Who is this guy? What does he want? What are we doing here? We all know it's just basically a photo op. We're going to see what the rest of Merrick Garland's statement looks like. It's like another, 2 paragraphs. There's nothing going on here. But he goes to their roll call. So all these guys are showing up for duty, and they just sort of parade the Attorney General in right in front of them. These guys are going, oh, what are you talking about? Can we get back to work? Leave us alone. And of course, though, before they leave, they've got to get their photographs in because they've got their scrapbooks that they need to start working on. So we've got, an image here. Everybody wants, hey, pose. And yes, we're doing a great job. And, we're okay, fine. And, okay. So they're having fun with it. And now we see the rest of the statement. So this is the entirety of the statement. It's about, three and a half paragraphs. So what Attorney General Merrick Garland says is, along with the Deputy Attorney, Lisa O. Monaco, and there's something I wanted to flag about this. This is very interesting to me. He's very, very supportive of his deputy attorney. We see her name mentioned a lot, right? He's every time that he does something, also with Monaco, which is curious. Don't know if that is too speculative. Maybe he's sort of, training a replacement, or maybe he's going to be slotted into a different position and Lisa Monaco then gets the attorney general role. I don't know, but he is referencing her a lot. And in fact, she makes a lot of these statements on her own. He doesn't really even do it often. We've covered many of these press releases that come just from Lisa Monaco, not from Merrick Garland. My initial thought was maybe that he would be, they were going to try to, I guess, get retribution or payback for not putting Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court, and that maybe they would want to elevate him up into that status. But then I looked at his age; he's 68 years old, so he's too old for that. So it may just be curious, may not be any real reason to it. Anyways, he's saying that the Attorney General and his deputy, they met with investigators, and they met with analysts, and they met with prosecutors and professional staff that's all assigned to the January 6 cases from the FBI's Washington field office and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. Okay, so as we go through the rest of this statement, I want you to start to think about resources. If you needed to build a house or something, you need a certain amount of lumber and a certain amount of electrical wire and a certain amount of concrete to pour the foundation and so on and so forth. Kind of the same concept when you're talking about prosecuting cases, right? When you are dealing with a law firm or a group of prosecutors, you're typically talking about assigning a caseload to a certain attorney. And, it depends on the caseload. If you have a lot of sort of low-level criminal cases, an attorney can handle, even up to 100 maybe cases, depending on how sort of intense they are. Okay, if it's a bunch of sort of traffic violations and things like that, one attorney can handle a large amount of cases because they don't require a lot of work. Now you sort of have the scale that works the other way. You may have an attorney that has a very serious murder case, or some gang-related cases that have multiple co-defendants, and those attorneys maybe have 5 to 10 cases that they work on a year, right? Or a capital punishment case, or something that requires a lot of effort. And so we have to think about that now, because we're talking about a certain number of defendants, and we have a certain number of manpower, or women power, or gender neutral power, whatever that is, that will work on solving this problem. The problem that we're framing out here is that there was an insurrection that happened. There were thousands of people that bombarded the congressional building. And we know, based on the previous stories that we've covered here, that the U.S. Attorney's Office and that the Capitol Hill Police and everybody, the Department of Justice, were having a lot of difficulty actually prosecuting these cases. We're so overwhelmed. This was such a massive problem. We talked about this in the Jacob Chansley case. They actually came out, the U.S. attorneys did, in many of these Capitol Hill defendant cases and said, we need 60-day continuances because we're just so overwhelmed. We can't get it together. And back then, I was screaming, what are you talking about? There's 500 extra cases coming through here. You guys, the entire U.S. government can't figure out how to move some bodies around so that they can prosecute a few extra cases. Okay, I have a law firm here in Scottsdale, and we can handle 500 cases, no problem at all. So it's one of these things that I'm just kind of shocked that it's been so difficult for the U.S. government to actually prosecute these things, given the fact that they've got the FBI Washington field office, right? The entire field office. They have the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. And I mean, a lot of resources. This is the federal stinking government. They got every single thing at their disposal, and they had a difficult time, so it didn't make much sense to me. Anyways, during the meeting, Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, they acknowledged the extraordinary work of the dedicated public servants across the U.S. Attorney's offices and the FBI field offices all throughout the country. Now, they're recognizing this work and the recent milestones in the investigation, including the arrest of more than 535 defendants. Okay, so put a pin in that number. 535 people, that's it. This whole thing, 535 people. I'm going to show you what an embarrassing number that is. The Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General encouraged the team to continue to follow the facts in this case and charge what the evidence supports to hold all the perpetrators accountable. Later, the Attorney General visited with members of the Capitol Police where he commended them for their bravery, expressed his appreciation, blah, blah, blah. FBI released 11 new videos of suspects in violent assault, so they're still going after it. They still can't figure it out. Charges contained in any of these things are just allegations. Office of the U.S. Attorney General. Okay, so I mentioned now that I want to sort of compare and contrast the Capitol Hill cases with the Scottsdale City Court cases. Okay, that's where our office is, right in the city of Scottsdale, right in Arizona. So I know exactly how the court works because we are there all the time. We've got many cases that we work out of the city of Scottsdale, and I'm involved in some other areas in the city of Scottsdale, and so I'm very familiar with how this stuff works. I want to show you some data from their public records. Now, you should be able to access this on your own, but let me see if I can. Got to pull this up here. What happened to my slide? Apologies, folks. I'm running a little bit on empty over here, just a slight little bit. And so I'm skidding in here. But what I'm going to do is show you my actual slide, or my a spreadsheet that I was able to draft from data from the city of Scottsdale. So let me show you what this looks like here. I have it open. And all of this, of course, is public record. And this is a spreadsheet that doesn't have any personal identifying information, but let me frame this out just a little bit better. So in the city of Scottsdale, right, we're not even one of the bigger cities in Arizona. We've got the city of Phoenix, we've got the city of Mesa, we've got Gilbert and Glendale and all of these other cities. Scottsdale's, it's a moderate sized city, and there's some criminal activity that goes on here, just like any other city. Every time that there's an arrest, every time the Scottsdale police book somebody into custody or book them into jail, they make a list. It's called a booking list. And all of this all of this information is accessible on the internet. So you can just go and pull it up. And what I've done is I've done that, right? You don't have to be an attorney to go get it, but I put it into a spreadsheet and I organized it a little bit. And the reason I did so is because I want to compare and contrast one city's data, one city, the city of Scottsdale, versus the Capitol Hill police cases. Okay, we know from them that they've got a lot of people working on this. The U.S. Attorney's Office, the entire Department of Justice, we have the FBI, we have probably many other agencies that are sort of all spiraling into this thing, and we've talked about them here. So we know what resources they have. Let's see what's going on out of the city of Scottsdale. So I want to show you what I did with this data. I know it's going to look like a big, boring spreadsheet here, but just sort of bear with me as I explain what's happening. You're going to see here in column B, we have the arrest date, okay? So what I did is I went through and I scrubbed all of the other dates outside of June. So right now we have June 1, and if we scroll all the way down, you're going to see that these charges just keep going, and we're just moving down the month. So now we're on June 10th. We're going to scroll down to June 13th. Keep going to June 17th, keep scrolling down, 6/20 now, we're down to 6/25, and the month wraps up right around 6/27. Okay, so that's when this data ends. And you'll notice that we've gotten down to 636 rows, which means we're going to delete the top row, which means we've got about 635 cases in 1 month. Okay, June, 1 month in June. The city of Scottsdale had 635 arrests or bookings or citations that came through their court. And it's just one city. Okay, we have 4 judges there. We have some temporary judges that are called pro tems that will help periodically. We have about 8 to 10 different prosecutors on average, right? That number sort of fluctuates, but about 2 prosecutors to the court. And so you've got, let's say about a total people of about 15 people plus all of the Scottsdale police. Of course, there are a lot of people there. And so that's the amount of resources that we're talking about. And they are able to handle, in June, 636 cases. Now, the Capitol Hill police, they have been beating themselves over the head trying to figure out how to prosecute 535 cases over the last 6 months. This was in 1 month in June. And so guess what happens next month? Scottsdale has another 500 to 600, sometimes 1,000 cases that come through, and they've got to deal with that. Are the Capitol Hill police going to have another 535 insurrection cases coming through next month? Probably not, because there's not going to be another insurrection. So Scottsdale has to prosecute and process 635 cases basically every month. And sometimes we get these massive spikes where we'll have a waste management open here, or a golf tournament, or the Super Bowl will be here, and everything goes bonkers. And so they have a surge of cases. How do I know that? Because, well, we've got surges of cases too, right? Because when it happens, people get charged. They need good legal representation, so they give our office a call. And this happens year round, all year round. So we have a very small city jurisdiction here that has a fraction, a sliver of the resources that the entire apparatus of the federal government has, and they're able to process through 636 cases a month while these people are struggling with 535. And so I know what the next question, of course, is going to be. Yeah, Rob, but this is a serious thing, right? These are totally different types of offenses. Not really, right? These are sort of trespass charges that we're seeing in the Capitol building. Many of them are being charged as sort of mid-tier felonies and low-level misdemeanors. We've seen some plea deals already come through where basically misdemeanors and probation. So it's the same type of charges. It's a trespass, just like going into being asked to leave a bar in Old Town Scottsdale and not ever leaving. It's a crime, just like it is to enter into a building at the Capitol. It's a different crime. It's a capital crime, and it's something that is prohibited by other federal statutes and things like that. But it's a criminal case. It is the same presumption of innocence, the same burden of proof, the same essentially rules of procedure that you see throughout the rest of the country, because they're all based out of the U.S. Constitution. So then you may be saying, well, these are Scottsdale crimes. These are just stupid things where nobody's even arrested, right? Well, let's take a look. So as we know, we've got 636 different counts here, different charges. Let's take a look at some of these things. So we can take a look at column D. We'll see these are the different Arizona statutes, or I'm sorry, no, those are the different report numbers. And then what we can see here are the different actual charges. So in row G, what we have here, we're going to see we've got DUI, let's see, some criminal speeding here, assault touch to injure, recklessly injuring. We have narcotic drugs violation. We've got a dangerous drugs violation, several warrants you can see here, different accidents, burglary in the second degree, drug paraphernalia, armed robbery, which is a good one, prostitution, of course, dangerous drug use, another prostitution, let's see, aggravated assault, impeding the breathing. So that means there was a choking or something going on there. We've got shoplifting, kids underage drinking alcohol, thefts, more dangerous drug uses, and the list goes on, right? You just keep scrolling down. Another burglary, urinating, defecating in public, dangerous drugs, sexual conduct, consensual, a lot of different charges, okay? Many of them more serious than just a simple trespass. So they're able to actually, prosecute some really serious crimes. Whereas here, they're just sort of, you entered a building improperly and you caused some damage, right? More analogous to a trespass or a disorderly conduct or even a criminal damage. One of those things, of course, I think would all be appropriate. But here we've got, dangerous drugs. We've got, what's this one? Drug paraphernalia, resisting arrest. Okay, so those all get, controversial. Child abuse, vulnerable adult abuse, aggravated assault. The list goes on. So the city of Scottsdale and their police department and these prosecutors, they're able to just motor through these cases month after month after month after month. And is it more complicated because they have to make these arrests, or are they able to process more because they're not actually booking people? They're just giving them citations. It's not that big of a deal. They just stop you and give you a citation, and they're not actually arresting them, like having to find these people and arrest them and book them and have detention hearings like Chansley and all of these other people. Like, it's sort of it must be just a kind of a lower level thing, right? No, all of these people are getting booked. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Let's take a look over here in column E now. Booked, without a warrant, booked, cited in lieu of detention, But look at all these bookings. Okay, booked. Probably 70 to 80% of these people are actually booked into jail, which means they get arrested, handcuffed, taken into custody. Now, there is a little bit of a difference here because these are local offenses, and the other offenses, sort of are scattered throughout the country. But what happens when that happens, of course, is they just issue a warrant for you. So they don't actually have to go and track you down. If you come to Scottsdale and, you get booked and you leave or you get cited, they just issue a warrant here. See all these warrants, right? Warrants for everybody going through here. Now, there's some other very good data. You can see what the location looks like. And, there's some other stuff I want to share with you, not because it matters. Okay, I think the point's been made here that the Capitol Hill police are prosecuting 535 cases. It's been taking them 6 months. They have to have these commemorative little events where they pat themselves on the back and take their scrapbook photos with each other. Very excited about the work that they've done. Meanwhile, we've got different defendants who are sitting in custody. We're going to talk about Jacob Chansley in the next segment, who just got denied bail for the third time. And they also asked for continuances in his case because they said, well, we're just so overwhelmed. We just can't handle this all. This was the worst attack on American democracy that we've ever seen. And so we just need more resources. And the judge go, oh, yeah, you're right. Totally. You need more time because you don't have the entire federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, and everybody. So we're going to give you 60 days. Good luck. We know you're overwhelmed. Meanwhile, right here, the court's right here. It's like 6 minutes down the road. They prosecute 600 cases every month, and they send some of these over to the Superior Court downtown if they're going to be felonies and things like that. But it's very, very possible to easily do this. It's not even complicated. But our federal government, of course, has a hard time with it for some reason. It's actually kind of embarrassing. I was expecting this number to be in the thousands. of arrestees 6 months later. It's not. It's 535 people. And several of those that we have seen, we've talked about here on the show. We've actually discussed their charges. They're not even related to anything that happened on January 6th. We've covered several cases where people showed up the next morning or later at the night when they were back inside counting the votes, and they're all being prosecuted. So I think if you went through this and you went through all 535 cases, you'd probably see that a lot of these are just outright garbage cases. Shouldn't ever be brought. They're political prosecutions through and through. And, they should be embarrassed for themselves, quite frankly, to sort of puff this up as this is a big, overarching endeavor that requires all of the resources of everybody from throughout the country for 535 cases. It's embarrassing, man. I mean, if I was a prosecutor, they could have called my office and we could have handled 535 cases like that, but they didn't, and I wouldn't do it anyways because I'm not a prosecutor. Those people are terrible. All right, so let me show you some of the other good data that is in here, just coming from the City of Scottsdale. Just because it's interesting, not that you care too much about it, but I want to show you sort of what I do with this data, and I think you might find it somewhat interesting. So if you take a look at all of the different crimes that occur throughout Scottsdale in the last month. So in June, you can see that they sort of break down into this pattern. So I wanted to just show you, you might see things like this similar in your city. But what we see here, we have sort of the highest offense is DUI, as you might expect. DUI impaired to the slightest degree, 60 of those in June in Scottsdale. Drug paraphernalia, we had 52 of those in Scottsdale. We had criminal speeding violations, a lot of those, 42. And then we sort of just kind of bounce around. Dangerous drugs were very high, 26 of those. 29 driving on a suspended license, which is a class 1 misdemeanor, which is the same as a DUI, which is insane, but it's the law. Narcotic drugs violations. And you'll notice this one, 10 different sexual conducts with minors under the age of 17 years old. So that number is a little bit higher than usual. More DUI, drugs, some of the lower tiers. Let's see what this one is. Failure to obey a police officer, that's one. Indecent exposure, that's one. Failure to appear, handbill distribution. Someone was handing out some stuff. That is a crime. And so, of course, just kind of some interesting data. And we use this for some of our marketing. We use this to sort of, do outreach. We have no qualms about marketing. I say this frequently, right? If we're the best law firm in the state of Arizona, if only we can help people, then we've got an obligation to go make sure they know about us, because there's a lot of other lawyers out there who are not good, and they have a very vocal voice on billboards and on TV commercials and things like that. So we're a little bit more tactical, I think, with how we interface with our community, but this data is also interesting. Also wanted to show you this quickly before we go. Some more data here. If we take down all of those charges and we sort of break them down into charts, I wanted to show you what it looks like. So 73% of the arrests are male in Scottsdale and 26% are female. So it's men who are breaking the law out here. And then if you break it down by race, the vast majority of them are white. Okay, so we've got about 500 so whites have been arrested. Black accounts for about maybe even less than 100, then I think that is going to be Indian and then Asian. So very, very few Asian arrests took place. And then this is just sort of a breakdown of the different districts where they're located. Scottsdale has 4 different districts, and they're sort of stacked throughout the city. So some interesting data there. I thought you might find that somewhat interesting. I'd be curious to see what some other cities look like, but don't have those numbers. So the big question, of course, is why are they doing this? Why are they puffing this up? Why are they making this whole thing about 535 cases? And, we got to have a anniversary party to celebrate our relationship right after 6 months. And they're going to continue to do this. Well, it's because it's about power, right? And they get a lot of money, a lot of funding. They get to exercise political control. They get to talk about things like gun violence and white supremacy and making sure that we don't have to worry about domestic violent extremism and domestic terrorism and all these things. So they're just going to keep milking this thing indefinitely. And you're going to see how, like a bad cancer, this just continues to spread throughout the country, which I've been saying it's going to. Joe Biden's big pro law enforcement wants to make sure they are everywhere, has been doing that for the last 40 years. And now the Capitol Hill police are going to be expanding as well, right, throughout the country. We don't have enough local and federal law enforcement agencies like the DEA, ATF, FBI, and on and on and on. Now we're going to have the U.S. Capitol Police showing up in your city. LA Times is telling us that the U.S. Capitol Police are to open a California office following the January 6th attack. So this was published yesterday by Sarah Wire over at the LA Times. This is why they're doing this. The U.S. Capitol Police announced that the agency was opening regional field offices in California and Florida to investigate threats to members of Congress in the wake of the January 6th attack. So did they mean like January 6th threats or just threats in general? Because it sort of reads to me like after the fact, right? In the wake of the January 6th attack. Like it happened, threats made in the wake after, right? The boat drives through the water and then the wake flows behind the boat. So the insurrection happened and now we've got threats to members of Congress in the wake. And so now this is not even in response to anything that happened on January 6th. This is just because there are ongoing threats. Threats against members of Congress, they say, have increased. As of Tuesday, total threats in 2021 were double what they were a year ago, according to the Capitol Police, which, of course, would the Capitol Police have any conflict of interest there in reporting those numbers? Like, would it serve them if the numbers were higher so that they could get more funding and so that they could have more offices and everybody could get a promotion? Maybe. I don't know. Home to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy, who's in Bakersfield, and other prominent members of Congress, California gives the law enforcement agency a Western base to investigate claims of threats made against members. The state is home to the nation's largest congressional delegation because it's a big state. Yeah, it's got a lot of people over there. So now California is going to be home to the Capitol Hill Police in California, even though Capitol Hill's over in D.C. Let's see what else is going on from the LA Times. They're going to tell us that the field offices in Tampa and San Francisco is where they're going to be. At this time, they tell us Florida and California are where the majority of our potential threats are currently, but your state is certainly coming next. The field offices will be a first for the department. A regional approach to investigating and prosecuting threats against members is important. So we'll be working closely with the U.S. Attorney's offices in those locations. Okay, well, that's good. So are they going to be able to prosecute more than, 10 cases a year? Maybe that'll be good. Hopefully they'll improve their efficiency. The new field offices are among the changes made since the attack 6 months ago, in which Capitol Police were quickly overwhelmed by thousands of pro-Trump supporters, hundreds of whom were able to break into the Capitol building, forcing members to halt certification. Got all that. Other changes spurred in part by congressional investigations and reports by the department's internal watchdog include what else? Increasing training for officers, improved intelligence gathering efforts, and protocols for reporting sensitive information, new equipment, and new technology for officers. So they are just coming in hot right off of this insurrection. They're going to just gobble up as much power as they can, and they're working hard for it. The police agency rarely provides information to the public on how it operates, citing security concerns and member safety. So not only are they going to do this, you can't even see how it works. For example, unlike other government agencies, the internal watchdog's reports are not publicly available. Oh my goodness. So I always make fun of the police for investigating themselves and finding that they didn't do anything wrong, right? Hey, no, we checked. It's good. We're perfectly good. Isn't that right, Joe? That's right, Lou. It is. Okay. And so now the Capitol Hill Police are sort of even a one tier above that. It's like you don't even get to ask them anything. Why? Because they're the Capitol Hill Police. And our oligarchs out there, the Congress people, they're so special that they need special rules for them because they're sort of above everybody else, as we all know now. A spokesperson over from the Capitol Hill Police did not answer questions on Tuesday about how many staff would be hired or what the cost to taxpayers would be. Spokesman said other regional officers were, oh my gosh. The spokesperson said other regional offices were expected. So they are coming down hard. Very few members of Congress are accompanied by security outside the Capitol. It's unclear if the new offices will be primarily investigating threats against members or whether it will also help when security is needed in the state. Okay, so it's not even just for investigating threats against members of Congress. It also could be for help when security is needed in the state from the Capitol Hill Police. Isn't that interesting? Wow, what a weird world we're living in. The Capitol Hill Police have jurisdiction to investigate all threats made against a member of Congress. So whatever they want, jurisdiction, anywhere they want to go. That's your Capitol Police. That is why we are making so much of the insurrection, is because they can, and it's very useful to them. So let's take a look at some questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com over in the live chat. So let's see who we have coming in here. We've got Engineer 12V says, y'all know that communication over unsecured services is monitored by the government. God knows. So he's got to warning everybody in the locals chat, to be careful over there. Be Brave says, it's legit, guys. The exercise is planned for July 9th. I don't know when they'll go live with it. Oh, so there's something going on over there. Let's see what else we have. We're going to scroll back down. We've got the zombies are out there, says Be Brave. Jeremy Matreed is in the house. He says, so to be honest about why the Democrats always exaggerate the truth is they are compulsive liars. It may sound harsh, but the truth will set you free. But first, it will make you mad. Yeah, Farmer's Daughter says, I loved California, left it years ago. Such a shame. Sharon Quidney says, I've seen it go downhill for some time. Good to see you, Sharon. Relic Hunters here saying hello. We've got Jupaz in the house, says, sounds like Biden's America is a police state. Well, it's looking like that, right? Because what's happening? We went through this yesterday on the show. We were talking about China and Hong Kong and how they sort of slowly started to unravel some of Hong Kong liberties away from them. There was sort of that three-tier approach that you needed. One, of course, is to seize control of the courts. The next would be to seize control of the, what was it? I think the third one was seizing control of the speech. So it was the courts. Oh, then it was the election. Then it was the speech, right? So you say, first of all, we're just going to sort of criminalize a bunch of activities, which they're working on here. Then next, what we're going to do is try to sort of seize control of the elections. We're going to federalize the elections, which is what they're doing here with HR 1. And then, of course, you have the what was the last one? I just said it. Seizing control of criminal law, the elections, and speech. And then in China, they got rid of it was Apple's news, one that was the most pro-democracy news or the most, I would say, free speech news that was there in Hong Kong. They're gone. You can't speak anymore. So same thing, of course, is happening here. That's why Donald Trump is filing a class action lawsuit, which we're going to talk about in the last section of the show. Let's see here. We've got Miss Lucky says, hi, Rob. Who is paying for all of this? What a waste of money. Doesn't the FBI have offices all over? They've got everything. They're everywhere. The FBI are everywhere, literally. I think in every state easily, okay? And they've got thousands of employees. So do the U.S. attorney's offices, okay? They dwarf anything that exists in a local city municipality. Unlimited funding, unlimited people, and they're having a difficult time prosecuting 535 cases. Or let's say you double that. Let's say you triple it. Oh my goodness. Wow, they've got a lot of work on their hands. 1,500 cases. Oh, wow. We're going to need to just sort of drop everything and reorient the entire government because we can't handle that. Scottsdale could handle that, right? We have Super Bowls here. We have any one of these cities could handle it. What they're doing is they are making this, and it's all about the politics so that they can continue to expand their footprint. Three Girlies is here, says, wait, they need a credible threat to have jurisdiction. Seems like they will be making up some threats to get the jurisdiction to overreach. So you can just presume that now. So they are granting themselves sort of unlimited jurisdiction. So they're going to plop them in your city so that they can go and say, well, we're going to be there to address threats against members of Congress. But then simultaneously, if we need to be available for other security mechanisms, well, we can be available for that too. And of course, these field offices are going to need money to function. And of course, they're going to need employees to man the field offices. And so that budget's going to go up. And then once they get it working in California and Florida, they're going to need to put them in other states throughout the rest of the country. Then you have the National Capitol Hill Police Force in your localities. So it's a good trend. Now, all right, I guess that's where things are going now. I'm Not Gas says, probably an end goal, but it takes a lot of infrastructure to get that rolling. TOS Forever says, do you think this is to replace the state and local police to have a national police? I have always been somebody who was sort of skeptical about that idea. But I think that it sort of is in alignment with a lot of the other patterns that we're seeing. They want to federalize national elections. We're seeing trends about sort of a federalization of not the police force, but sort of the police standards, which would be the first thing that you would do in that line of dominoes before you would ever nationalize the police force. You'd want to make sure that you are sort of nationalizing the standards, right? And the justification for doing that is that we have criminal justice reform problems around the country. We have George Floyd's, we have Ray Shard Brooks and Breonna Taylor's. And the problem is, according to these people, is that it's too ununiform. It's too many variables there. In Minnesota, they've got certain standards. In Missouri, they've got different standards. And so we need to nationalize this so that there are equal standards across the board, so that we don't get knees on the necks. And of course, that is the bureaucratic solution to virtually everything. It's just, more rules, more government, more standards, more regulations, more rules, more laws, more enforcement, blah, blah, blah. And it typically never works. So that may be sort of the first attempt, is to nationalize the standards, and then after that we sort of see more of a tendency to nationalize the police force. And maybe once people get comfortable with the Capitol Hill police in their backyards, it becomes less of something that is problematic. And remember this, Obama said this in one of his early speeches. This was viral a long time ago. Obama said, we need a national police force that is just as strong, that is just as well funded as everything else, right? A civilian police force or whatever he said. So I think that this is part of, if we're always going to be having this battle between local governments and federal governments, which we're seeing take place, okay, and it's not just me saying that. There are governors around the country that are saying, no, we're not following your stinking rules. Come enforce it if you want to. And we've talked about enforceability here, right? I think it was Missouri. That governor said, if you come in here and try to enforce federal gun laws, we're going to fine your federal agents $50,000 a pop every time they do it. And the Justice Department responded and said, you can't do that. There's a supremacy clause thing going on. So now you sort of have this kind of soft, kind of pseudo rebellion thing going on here, where they're just saying, we're not going to enforce those laws anymore. Well, that's fine, so long as the federal government doesn't come and try to enforce them. Okay, that technically their laws reign supreme in a lot of situations because of the supremacy clause. But the problem with that has always been enforceability. They may have it right in courts, in the court of law, but they can't actually go out and enforce the laws across all of the different states. And so states are recognizing that. And when that happens and you start to see states sort of push back on the feds a little bit, they're going to respond. And how are they responding? By saying, well, we're just going to put a bunch of federal police in your states now, and we're going to see how you like that. Okay, what's Missouri going to do if they put them in there and they start prosecuting gun crimes? We'll see. All right, we've got I'm Not Gas says, remember, Rob, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Major eye roll on that one. And I saw that there. Let's see what else we've got. We have Sharon's here. We got TOS Forever here. Good to see everybody. Joe Snow's in the house. He says, have people seriously not realized that America is under attack from within? Yeah, the enemy within, right, is oftentimes stronger than the enemy without, because you know who the enemy without or outside is. Oftentimes, you don't know who the enemy within is, and I think it is certainly concerning. So, great questions. Thank you so much for all of those coming in from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Really appreciate all the support over there. And before we move on, quick reminder that I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group. You can see our sign right there. We're located in Scottsdale, Arizona. We offer free case evaluations for anybody who's facing criminal charges and just needs a little bit of help working themselves through the justice system. We want to help them through that because we help people get amazing outcomes. And the main thing, our mission here, is to provide safety, clarity, and hope to good people facing criminal charges. And so that's our phone number, 480-787-0394, or we're online at rrlawaz.com. And if you don't need any criminal legal services, that's a good thing. Maybe you're interested in some educational materials, in particular, my law enforcement interaction training, which is available over at gumroad.com/Robert Gruler. It's a 2.5-hour training where we talk about the 1, 2, 3 rule for dealing with the police. It's the only rule. It's going to cover most situations. I think it's well worth your while. That way, if you use that, you never have to get a criminal lawyer in the first place. It's good. Good thing to know. All right, and so those were all great questions. Thank you, everybody, for your support. I really do appreciate it. Next segment, we are moving on. Jacob Chansley. We've been following the Qanon Shaman for some time here on the show, and he's been trying to get out of custody. Believe it or not, yesterday was the 6-month anniversary of the insurrection. It's been June 6th was the date. Been 6 months, and Jacob Chansley is still in custody. He's the Qanon Shaman. If you recall, he was the guy with the horns and sort of that entourage that was rolling through the Capitol, and they took a lot of, very provocative pictures, and those were spread all over the internet, sort of became a symbolic figurehead of the entire thing. And so he's been sitting in custody for a long time. On June 30th, we talked about on this show a request by his attorneys to get him out of custody. Okay, this is something I've been sort of upset about for a long time here, saying that the Capitol Hill defendants are getting treated poorly, and disparately than some other defendants that we've seen throughout the rest of the country. And in particular, we're talking about the Antifa people, some of the BLM protesters. Many of them got right out of custody. They were released on their own recognizance. Or people like Kamala Harris were supporting bail funds that literally helped free people who burnt down the 3rd Precinct out of Minneapolis. And so major sort of accommodations were provided to certain people from a certain political ideology to get them out of custody, work their cases through the system. And then what happens is they get diversion deals, they get plea deals, and their cases kind of get dismissed and go away. And so, okay, that might be fine for those particular defendants. I don't know the nature of their cases. But simultaneously, we have to ask ourselves, if a similarly situated defendant is not getting those same benefits, we have to start asking ourselves why that is. Might it be because it's a political prosecution? I think so. And we're going to see what happens here in this case. This is the 3rd time that Jacob Chansley is trying to get out of custody, and we're going to go through this. We're going to get some background here. Of course, this is Jacob Chansley now. He's not in his outfit, and he's sitting in custody. I want to remind everybody out there who says, he's just a piece of garbage. He shouldn't have ever been doing. Okay, you can have that opinion. He's still a human being, and he is still somebody who deserves due process, the presumption of innocence, and the same standards as everybody else would, right? If this was your son or your brother or your family member, you'd want to make sure that they were being treated fairly and justly, regardless of what they did. So I can understand that perspective, but let's measure it across a standard rather than sort of prejudging the man based on the allegations. So here the article comes over from Newsweek. It says that Shaman Chansley loses the bid for freedom ahead of the Capitol riot trial. So he's on the trial road. A judge today sided with prosecutors in their quest to keep Jacob Chansley, also known as the Qanon Shaman, in jail ahead of his trial for the role during the Capitol riot. One of the most well-known faces, he had the photograph with the horn headdress. In an attempt to secure his client's release from prison, we have Chansley's attorney. His name is Albert Watkins. He argued the judge's original decision was erroneous, based on inaccuracies and lacking in evidence. So that's an interesting approach. Typically judges don't like that when you say, hey, that was wrong and that's inaccurate. Okay, you got to be a little bit more careful than that. Let's see what else is going on here. Judge Royce Lamberth disagreed with the defense. He appreciated the argument. He said in a hearing that Watkins failed to present any material evidence that wasn't available originally. And so essentially what this judge is going to tell us is, thank you for asking a 3rd time, but you didn't provide us any new information. We need more than this. Now, there is some new information about what's going on, and so I do want to go through this just to show you kind of how this stuff works and how difficult it can be to sort of fight against the system. Okay, if the courts are going to keep somebody in custody, they're going to keep him in custody. But at the same time, we also have to ask ourselves, what did this attorney do specifically? Did he write a good motion? Did he, is he doing an admirable job here? Let's see what we can figure out. So on June 30th, as I mentioned, we talked about this previously on the show, there was a minute entry for a motion hearing. So they had a hearing in court where they were talking about whether they could release him from custody. So the motion at that time was taken under advisement, okay, with a forthcoming order. So what this means is when they all came into court on June 30th, it was a video motion, so they were all sort of probably appearing telephonically or by video, and they're having a conversation about Jacob Chansley getting out of custody, releasing him from custody. So they make their arguments, they submit their motions, the defense submitted their motion, the prosecution opposed it. So the prosecution said, no, we don't want him out of custody. And then the judge listened to everything and said, well, I don't have an answer for you right now. I'm going to take this under advisement, and I am going to come back at a later time and give you a formal memorandum, which is what we have over here. So now what we can see is on July 6th, which is yesterday, we have a memorandum opinion. Okay, so we have the order, first of all, which is down here. The order is denying motion, which is the motion to reopen the detention hearing and to release him from custody. So it's just a short order, and it looks like this. It says, for the reasons set forth in the accompanying memorandum, the court hereby denies Jacob Chansley's motion to reopen his hearing and release him from custody, so ordered, signed off on here by Royce C. Lamberth out of the U.S. District Court for D.C. Okay, this was filed just yesterday, and it was page 1 of 1. This is Judge Lamberth over here, of course, and then this is Jacob Chansley. So you're asking yourself, well, there's not much there. So what else do we have? That's where we're going to take a look at the memorandum, which of course is over here, couple other things I wanted to just highlight we're not going to cover. Actually, we are going to cover this. This is the status report from the U.S. Attorney's Office. And so they're going to tell us a little bit about Jacob Chansley's mental health condition, because last time we talked about this, he's sort of under monitoring right now, sort of psychiatric evaluation, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, because the government is in custody, it has him in their custody. The government's responsible for providing the court with updates. So we're going to take a look at what's going on there. There's also a draft transcript that we're not going to look at. And then there's a motion filed by Jacob Chansley's attorneys to compel some sort of disclosure. We're also not going to look at that. So let's take a quick look then at the actual memorandum. So again, this is the judge's explanation as to why Chansley is not getting out. This is the third attempt. His attorney has already tried twice. And so the third time, it's unlikely that he's going anywhere, especially if this attorney is sort of not demonstrating or pleading new facts. If they're not going to be introducing anything new, the judge is just not going to find any differently. So let's see what this judge is saying. He says here, we can see this is a 9-page document, and we're not going to read through the whole thing. I actually clipped out some of the more boring stuff. So it's 9 pages, so we can roll through it relatively quickly. Once again, it says, earlier this year, the court denied Chansley's motion for release. It said no conditions of release would reasonably assure the safety of the community or his appearance as required. Okay, and so that's the standard. What kind of conditions can the court impose on somebody before they let them go to make sure that they come back to court and to make sure they're not a danger to the community? And now, oftentimes, for people, they don't even need to do anything. It's just a simple release. Hey, you've never been in trouble before. You've never not shown up to court. You haven't so much as had a traffic ticket. Do you promise to come back to court? Yes, I do. Okay, sign right here. You're on your way. Don't need you to do anything. Sometimes a court will make you post a bond. They'll say, hey, well, we're only going to let you out if you post 25 grand. That way, if you leave, we've got some money to go get you back. And somebody says, well, that's a lot. So an attorney might come in and negotiate that down from 25,000 down to, 500 or something. And so they post that. Or it's the simple fact of hiring an attorney will sometimes convince a court to, release somebody. Oh, he's got counsel. He's here. He hired them. We trust that firm. And so a judge may sort of change those release conditions accordingly. You can also have a release if you have, let's say, an ankle monitor, right? Or you check in with what's called pre-trial services so that you can go and actually communicate with somebody while you are out on release. You can also be sort of confined to certain areas. You can be precluded from going certain places. There are many options to ensure that people can be let out of custody. Okay, in America, remember what we talk about here? It's called the presumption of innocence. Very important concept to philosophy in general, and especially, the law. But the concept is you are innocent until you're proven otherwise, or until you just agree that. I'm going to go ahead and plead guilty to this thing. You don't even need to prove anything. I'm acknowledging it. But we operate on that basis, that everybody starts off innocent. And so when we are in a situation like this, where Jacob Chansley has been charged with several crimes, he still deserves that presumption. And that means that we should do everything humanly possible to make sure that we're not interfering with his liberty, because at this moment in time, he is still innocent. Legally, we've seen the pictures, we've seen the videos, we know, but legally he is innocent. And so we have to make sure that we're protecting those liberties and not just saying, well, we all kind of saw the video, so who cares, whatever. He seems like a bad guy. We don't like his political ideology or whatever, so we're just going to throw away the keys. Nobody cares, right? That's not how this works. And the law supposed to say that we do everything possible to let you out. And we only impose harsh conditions on you to make sure that you are not a danger to the community and to make sure that you show up for court. So they're saying it needs to be reasonably assuring the safety, reasonably assuring his appearance. And they're saying that previously when this request was made, that was not satisfied. So let's see what else is going on. Chansley then now moves the court to reopen the hearing, saying he's got new evidence and information, in quotes, discovered after the first hearing. The government opposes the motion, saying that he has not put forth any new evidence warranting the reopening. So the court ordered parties to submit briefings, so brief both sides, about the issue of Chansley being a flight risk, which neither party addressed in the initial filings. Once the court received the supplemental briefs, it held a hearing, which we talked about last week. Upon consideration of the briefs, the court is going to deny Chansley's motion to reopen his case because they're saying that he has not proffered any new information that has a material bearing on the issue and whether any conditions of release would reasonably assure that he does not flee pending trial. Okay, so the judge is basically hanging his hat on that. The judge is saying we can't let him out because we don't know if he's going to flee or not. And nobody briefed that anyways. So here he says, thus, even if the court were to find that Chansley has proffered new information that has a material bearing on the issue of dangerousness, the court has no occasion to reconsider Chansley's flight risk, which was an independent justification for detaining him while he awaits his trial. So it sounds like, they kind of, like his attorney kind of just missed the flight risk portion of the argument. He's not a danger to the community, never been in trouble before, has a lot of good mitigation, but didn't talk about the flight risk thing. Okay, let's see what else. The court assumes familiarity with the facts and the procedural history. We all saw it. There, the court found that by clear and convincing evidence that no conditions of release would reasonably assure the public safety. So let's see, ask ourselves that, right? No conditions of release could reasonably assure the public safety. So he has to stay in custody. Really? Like home detention, ankle monitoring, anything? Nothing else is possible? Only incarceration? Seems pretty extreme to me. It also found by a preponderance of the evidence that no conditions of release would reasonably assure his appearance. So accordingly, the court denied the order. Goes on, he says, now, 4 months later, Chansley wants to reopen all of this. He says that there's new evidence. He discovered that after the first detention hearing, that since it showed that he would not pose a danger to the public, he said, in support of this motion, Chansley provides dozens of links to videos that he says confirm that law enforcement gave him permission to enter the Capitol building. And he references that. The defense counsel, which is his attorney, also notes and represents that after the first detention hearing, he discovered important information about the flagpole that Chansley carried under the Capitol. Specifically, he says that the finial, which is the thing on the top of the flagpole, was affixed to the pole with a zip tie and thus could not have been used as a weapon, right? This is from the motion that the defense attorney who was working for Jacob Chansley filed on his behalf, says that, the flagpole, judge, that you were concerned about? Well, look, there was the spike at the top of the flagpole that was just on there by a zip tie. It's just like loosely hanging there. It's not going to actually injure anybody. So don't worry about that. So the judge is sort of framing that out. Now the government responded. So remember, the way that this works is one side moves, the other side responds. And so the court is going to consider what the government has to say. We have Mr. Chansley's defense lawyer who wants him out. And we have the government who says, nope, we oppose that. They're arguing, saying that he has not come forward with sufficient evidence to reopen the hearing. The government argues that if the court does reopen the hearing in the alternative, it should find that Chansley has not proven that he would not be a danger if released to the community. So we're sort of arguing about, dangerousness and a flight risk. After Chansley replied, so you file a motion. So the defense files a motion. They move first. The government responds, and then the defense replies to the response. So the moving party gets the last word. Chansley replied. The court ordered the parties to submit supplemental briefings about the flight risk concept. In its order, the court noted that although the parties' briefs discuss at length the issue, whether any conditions of release would reasonably assure public safety, the briefs say nothing about Chansley's risk of flight. And because the court found his flight risk to be an independent justification for detaining him, the court requested the parties brief this issue as well. Chansley's then supplemental filing on flight risks largely rehashes many of the arguments that he made at the first hearing. He repeats he has no criminal history, no passport, has lived in Phoenix his entire life. Chansley also proposes the same custodian, his mother, previously rejected at his first detention hearing, explaining that the court is not persuaded that the defendant's mother will ensure his compliance with any conditions of release, given her repeated statements during a 60-minute interview that her son did nothing wrong. So what's going on here? The judge is not happy during the first filing that the defense lawyer didn't address the flight risk stuff. So says, you guys got to go back out there and talk about that. You got to brief that issue for us. Okay, before I can let him out, I got to make sure that he's not a danger to the community and he's not going to flee. So they only talked about the danger of the community stuff. They didn't mention the fleeing stuff. So then court says, all right, go brief that. Go write that up and bring it back to me. The attorney does that. Kind of sounds a lot like the first motion. Rehashing the first one at the first hearing, talks about no criminal history, which, doesn't really make a flight risk argument. You could say so. You could say that a person having criminal history might if you have a prior criminal record, any subsequent crime necessarily sort of aggravates the penalty because you've got priors. So, if he had criminal history, maybe this would be sort of the end of the line for him, right? So let's say, for example, somebody who comes in and they're on their 7th DUI, right? Their penalty is going to be a lot more serious than somebody on their first DUI. So they've got a lot more criminal history. If they're on their 7th DUI and they know they may be facing 10 years in prison, they, in my sort of opinion, would have a higher risk of flight because they may just say, no, I'm out of here, right? I'm not going to show up to court because I know what's going to happen. I already did prison for my 6th DUI. Now I've got a 7th one. I know what the consequences are, so I'm just going to bail. So criminal history, I think, can actually have some flight risk impact. But this judge sort of, I think, is implying that it doesn't. No passport, I think that absolutely goes to not being a flight risk, right? He can't leave the country. He doesn't have a passport. He lives in Arizona nearly his entire life, which is where I'm living. I've lived here my entire life. So shout out Arizona. What's up, Jacob? Jacob also proposes the same custodian. So his mother and the mom was out there on 60 Minutes saying he didn't do anything wrong. He did nothing wrong. So the judge doesn't want to release him into her custody because who knows if she'll actually comply with anything. Chansley does offer a few new facts. At the first hearing, he represented that his mother lives in Phoenix and that he could live with her. Now, defense counsel adds that many of Chansley's close relatives also live in the area, including his grandfather, step-grandmother, uncle, brothers. Defense counsel further says that if released to Phoenix, arrangements have been made for Chansley to procure mental health care from a licensed psychiatrist there, okay, here in Arizona. And so this is the other aspect of this thing that I think maybe some people are overlooking is that, the judge has to consider his mental health and his mental well-being. Let's see where this is going. Defense counsel also introduced new information regarding Chansley's flight risk. Counsel stated that if the court would not release to live in Phoenix, there are alternative arrangements available in secure locations in St. Louis near defense counsel's office, right? So just, hey, bring him out over here with us. Defense counsel added that he would be happy to talk to the court in detail about those arrangements off the record to avoid the disclosure of names and locations. Additionally, defense counsel has arranged for Chansley to receive health care and mental health care in either Phoenix or St. Louis. So, man, what a good attorney, man. That's good stuff, right? Maybe kind of overlook some of the flight risk stuff, but that's good. You say, I'm going to propose he can come here, health care, mental health care, kind of bending over backwards to do whatever he can to help that guy. So that's good. In response, the government maintains that Chansley has not proffered any new information. So it's basically nothing new that warrants a reopening of the proceeding. Chansley's motion with all this background is now ripe for consideration. So what happens? The judge goes through and he talks about the legal standard here about what needs to be shown in order to sort of reopen this. Okay, the defense here is asking strongly to say, we want to reopen this. We've got a lot more stuff to explore. What do you have? Can we open this up? And the court says, well, you can, but you got to meet this standard. Certain things have to happen. And here they just don't. Let's see how he explains this in the discussion section. He says, after Chansley's first hearing, the court found by clear and convincing evidence that no conditions of release would assure the safety of the community. And the reason being, he says, Chansley's challenges to the court's initial findings on dangerousness, he says those are meaningless unless he convinced the courts to revisit and reverse its initial finding on the flight risk. To do so, he says, you got to have new information that has a material bearing on the issue of flight risk. Okay, so now you see these quotes here, material bearing on the flight risk. That's over from US Code. So he's saying, okay, now we have a standard. This new information, does it have a material bearing? It's great that his grandmother lives in Phoenix. It's great that, he doesn't have a passport. It's great that whatever. But does that have a material bearing on the flight risk issue? Let's see what the judge says. He says, yeah, there was new information. None of it has a material bearing. None of it. He says, it doesn't impact the question about whether any condition or any combination of conditions could assure his appearance at trial. He said that the defense counsel first represents that his activities, especially with his mother, are there. He says it bears a logical connection to the issue, but not a material bearing. Instead, he talks about the Bail Reform Act. The court has to consider something that actually affects the court's inquiry. He says this information does not. Family ties do not mitigate any of the other concerns the court identified. Ooh, I don't know about that. I think I disagree with the judge on that one, my friends. Family's very important, right? His whole family's here. I would tend to side on the side of release there, right? Release him to the family. He says the family has no material bearing on it. Does not actually affect, yeah. Okay, well, those, he says, those include Chansley's ability to travel long distances. Okay. He says family ties do not mitigate any of the other concerns. So the judge is saying, listen, yeah, the family's there, but so what? Chansley can still travel long distances using untraceable methods. And his ability to quickly raise large sums of money for travel through non-traditional sources. Wow. Chansley's family say they have not prevented him from traveling undetected in the past. The court is unpersuaded they will prevent him from doing it in the future. So it sounds like the family has maybe had an issue with this previously. Like they've had custody of Chansley, but maybe he's just left without their permission. So the judge doesn't have any faith. Not sure that that's what he's saying, but it sort of seems like we can glean that from that. Moreover, Chansley maintains that if he's released to Phoenix pending trial, he would return home to live with his mother. But the court already rejected that arrangement as insufficient, and he did not propose a new custodian. But he also sort of mentioned his lawyer. For these reasons, the family ties to Phoenix do not have a material bearing on the court's flight risk analysis, which I totally disagree with that. Absolutely disagree with that. I think that family is very important. I think that he would be well served to be with his family rather than being in custody. What the judge is talking about here is sort of trying to predict the future or like look into a crystal ball and sort of analyze all of the different permutations. Yes, it is possible that he could quickly raise large sums of money for travel. Sure, no question. It is also possible that he could travel long distances using untraceable methods. Yes, we got that. It's also possible that a meteorite slams into the side of the prison and he just walks right out the front door. I don't know. So there's a lot of possibilities here. And when judges start playing this game, well, this is possible and this could happen and this could happen and this could happen. Yeah, we can do that all day long, all day. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the presumption of innocence. You don't get to sit there and come up with a bunch of reasons as to why somebody should not be released from custody when I think personally, a family is a very safe place to release somebody into custody. Okay, especially if you've got a big family like that. You got a number of people all coming into court saying, we're here to help. We're here to help. We'll take care of them, right? You're a judge. You say, yes, because of the presumption of innocence, because of the family support, this makes sense. We don't want him to sit in custody. Not this judge, though. Nor, he says, does defense counsel's passing reference to a secure location matter. Understandably, defense counsel stated that he would not provide further details, but since the hearing, which took place nearly a week ago, defense counsel has not provided any information to the court regarding that secure location. Oh, no. That attorney just got thrown under the bus right there. Oh. That's a bummer. All right. Without information on the arrangements that have been made, the court is unable to assess whether this release plan would reasonably assure Chansley's appearance as required. The court said, well, I was going to listen to your argument, but you didn't send me any of that follow-up information there. Not good. Not good. Oh, no, that's terrible. All right. Finally, while the court takes seriously defense counsel's representation that Chansley's mental health has declined while in jail, the fact that arrangements have been made for Chansley to obtain mental care in Phoenix or St. Louis does not have a material bearing on the issue. So the guy's having a mental breakdown in there. He's suffering. And we're saying, hey, we've got some pretty good resources out here, Your Honor, that we can just sort of, get him plugged into with his family, with some psychiatrists, anywhere. Maybe that should have a material bearing on his release conditions. And it sounds pretty reasonable to me. But the judge just says, yeah, but that has nothing to do with the bearing on his flight risk. Because what does that have to do with that? Well, the opposite argument, of course, is going to be that, well, if he gets proper medical treatment and care, maybe some of the underlying mental health problems that led to the underlying crime in the first place would be dealt with. Maybe this would be something that he can actually be rehabilitated rather than just sort of punished and allowed to descend into ever worse conditions. No material bearing, said this judge. Okay. On the issue, he says the court did not consider the mental health when evaluating his risk of flight, which, of course, if somebody is, I think, in good mental health, maybe they don't have a risk of flight, whereas somebody who's not thinking clearly may have a risk of flight. So you can see how there logically how medical care might be useful. Instead, as noted above, the court pointed to Chansley's ability to travel long distances using untraceable methods. Court finds that no conditions of release would reasonably assure his appearance, and he says, in sum, Chansley has not provided any new information that has a material bearing on the issue. Without this showing, the court will not revisit its prior finding. Accordingly, the court must deny Chansley's motions. Signed off here July 6th by Royce Lamberth, United States Court District Judge. Man, that's a tough day for Chansley and his lawyer, candidly. All right, so here is the final document that I wanted to share with you. As we heard about, Chansley is still in custody. He is still suffering from mental issues that are needing to be addressed. As I explained, because he is in government custody, the government has responsibility for that. So they have to provide a status update. They did that also yesterday. They say the government submits this update. Since the last update, the defendant remains housed in FCI Englewood in Littleton, Colorado. He's going to undergo his competency evaluation. The parties have been providing the appropriate information to the evaluator, and the government does not have any additional updates as to the status at that time. So he's basically just, sitting in there, just wasting away. And the judge is not going to let him out. So let's see what's going on with the court, or with the not the courts. I read a statement over at Locals, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. All right, let's see who is in the house. We've got Sharon Quidney says he is a political prisoner. Do you seriously expect him to get any kind of break at all? I mean, I was hopeful, honestly. It's. This whole thing, I think, has really been a real big black eye on the criminal justice system, and a really big black eye, more so. The justice system has a lot of black eyes. We can all acknowledge that. What I have seen from sort of the criminal defense bar, a lot of these criminal lawyers out there who say, "Oh, we're going to represent everybody. We'll represent anybody, anywhere, no matter what." Not much from them, right? Not a lot of people are coming to the aid of these people who are in custody, and it is a sad, sad thing. So I was hopeful that maybe our country had not descended into that quite yet, but I am, of course, not surprised. Arizona, want to know. Let's see if I can get this going. Want to knows here says Arizona people need to watch out for. Plus, it's far from D.C. courts. Yeah, so talking about, I think, them expanding their presence all over the place. We have Relic Hunter here says, this should be reopened. Please, this is terrifying. Yeah, it is a scary thing. Joe Snow says, this is all terrifying. There is no more justice. There is no more liberty. There is no more press. That comes from Joe Snow. We have Relic Hunter says, this is inhumane. The Jeremy Matrita says, shouldn't a judge use the reasonable person test? Just because something is possible does not mean it is probable. Chansley will likely become homeless. Yeah, that happens a lot. People, everything just sort of gets stripped away from him. Now, listen, Jacob Chansley is somebody who's got an attorney. Thankfully, a lot of people don't. A lot of people get, public defenders, which can be amazing attorneys. I'm not belittling them at all. They're amazing attorneys. But it's, he's got a lot of eyeballs on this. For every Jacob Chansley, there are thousands of people who are also just sitting in custody that nobody even thinks about. Just, whatever, right? That guy did this. This guy did this. He's a drug addict. He's a rapist. He's somebody. And they're people with mental problems. They just get thrown in the back of a jail cell and just forgotten about. So this this is symbolic of sort of a deeper problem, I think. Certainly he's a political prisoner, but there are a lot of people who are also sort of at the receiving end of a tyrannical government. And that's why I get so passionate about these issues. I just, I can't. We have a lot of bullies in this country in our legal justice system, and I'm not happy about it. Relic Hunter says, everyone is a flight risk according to this judge's judgment. Yeah. So this judge is actually a pretty conservative judge, if I read that correctly. And, a lot of conservative judges are going to be very tough on crimes. We've got 3 girlies in the house. Says, anyone put in segregation or protected custody could end up with mental health issues. 23 hours in a cell is inhumane. That's from 3 girlies. Good to see you, 3 girlies. Nadarb says, what the F is a material bearing even mean? And so if you read the discussion, the legal standards section of that opinion, you'll see what the judge goes into, but it's sort of something that has to be of consequence, right? It has to be something meaningful. It can't just be sort of random new information. And just like anything in the law, right, it's open to interpretation. So a judge can sort of interpret it any which way they want. We have, let's see here. Joe Snow says, what you got in your pockets right now? My last PD. Oh no, that's terrible. Yeah, that's awful. I've never seen that. Public defenders are amazing attorneys. Rob, stop drinking the clown world Kool-Aid. So I don't know about your public defenders, Joe, but I do know a lot of good public defenders. I know a lot that are not that great also, but I know many of them that are quite good, and some of them do good work with great trainings and things like that. So I never like to talk badly about the public defenders. They're on the right side. As long as you're on the right side of the line, you're good in my book. I got nothing bad to say about the public defenders. Prosecutors, though. All right. Great questions all coming in from over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Thank you, everybody, for your continued support over there. And as you know, if you happen to know anybody in the state of Arizona that is facing criminal charges, we would love the opportunity to help. At our law firm, the R&R Law Group, we're dedicated to helping good people get amazing results in their cases. And one of the most important things that we want to do is make sure that they feel that they have safety, clarity, and hope in their cases. Our phone number is 480-787-0394. We're online at rrlawaz.com. We can help with any type of criminal case in the state of Arizona: DUIs, domestic violence, traffic violations, drug offenses, all sorts of offenses, including removing mugshots off the internet and helping to clear up old records like old warrants and restoring your right to vote and possess a firearm again. There's a lot that we can do to help. We're super passionate about the work that we do, and we would love the opportunity to speak with somebody and see what we can do to help. If you don't need any legal services, that's a good thing. You may want some informational offerings, though. I have available at gumroad.com/Robert Gruler, a law enforcement interaction training. It's a 2.5-hour training that is, I had fun. I think that the other people there had a good time as well. And we were talking about the 1-2-3 rule for dealing with law enforcement. So specifically, there's only one rule. It's the 1-2-3 rule. Number 2, the 2 questions that law enforcement can ask you that you have to respond to. And then number 3, the 3 response answers that you can use if they ask you an inappropriate question. Very useful stuff. Check that out over at gumroad.com/Robert Gruler. And don't forget to check out some of our other channels and links down in the description below. And I would also, I'm asking for a lot, but I would love a subscribe if you have not done so already. All right. So thank you for all of that, my friends. And we've got one more segment left. And this is the kind of the big news of the day. Donald Trump's back in the news, and he's coming in hot. He is now filing a class action lawsuit against the big tech companies, some of the ones that have given us a lot of grief here on this channel, including Twitter, Facebook, and Google. And so this is catching everybody by surprise a little bit. This is a big move. We've been hearing a lot of, rumblings about Trump's next move. What's he going to do? And a lot of speculation about the next platform. Is he going to be on Parler? No, that didn't work out. Is he going to be on Getter? No, that didn't work out. Is he going to have a sort of his own website or launch something new? No, not really. So now what he's doing, he's going right back at the face of the beast, taking it right back to these people. And I think it's actually a good thing. I've had a lot of problems with this for a long time, talked about sort of this in the context of civil liberties, talking about raising the standard that we demand free speech in this country. And largely we've said that the government is not allowed to do that, but the government has gotten around that. They've escaped their prohibition against limitations on free speech by embarking on these sort of very, very close almost incestuous relationships with the big tech platforms so that Facebook can censor you. And when they do it, it's not the government, it's Facebook. They're a private company. They can do whatever they want. Same with Twitter, same with Yahoo or Google or YouTube or any one of these other places. They can do whatever they want. And because it's not the federal government, it has no implication on free speech, even though most of the speech is happening on these platforms. The government locked everybody down, said you can't go outside, so you actually can't go out there and actually speak freely in public. So we're going to lock you down, and then we're going to take away the only mechanisms that you do have to really participate meaningfully online, like Twitter and some of these other platforms. So you can't contest, you can't even speculate about COVID or the election or any of these things. And they're just going to strip that right out from under you. And we've been doing our part here to slowly but surely sort of build the next platform and encourage this migration to develop other communities where we can really connect a little bit more meaningfully, build something better than the old tech platforms, right? Move over to locals, get off of YouTube, get off of all these other places, and then eventually we can start creating communities that have deeper connections and deeper bonds, and the tech companies become superfluous. But that takes a long time, right? That takes a lot of runway in order to build that. We know that YouTube and Google and all of these other companies have been building for 20 years, many of them, and now they're doing well. So it's going to take some time. And I've always been somebody who is a big proponent in free speech and the First Amendment. I think it's absolutely critical to everything that we do. That's why it's the first one. Everything else doesn't matter if you can't talk about it freely. And so the fact that Donald Trump and his team are going to be going hard against some of these tech companies, I think this is a good move. Now, I'm not sure that they're going to get anywhere because I don't know that necessarily that the law is on their side, but at least what we see here is a response to this. You know, it's sort of the same thing that we're going to see from the Democrats. They're going to be beating the hell out of the January 6th stuff, basically for the next probably decade or so. And so whether Donald Trump is winning this or not, right, whether this goes up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court comes back down and says, you're right, Donald, this is wrong. Free speech for everybody. And they sort of put the limitations on some of these big tech platforms that are, in my opinion, are actually undermining free speech. I think they're dropping below the standard. So the Supreme Court is not really mandating anything. It's just sort of reestablishing the baseline standard that we have free speech. We did this previously with civil rights, right? Remember when people would say, black people over there at that drinking fountain and white people over here. And we as a country said, that's ridiculous. That's insanity. Yes, it's a private company. We get that, but that's a violation of civil rights. We're not going to allow that anymore. And we didn't. And it's because we raised the standard up here. We don't let private companies do things that infringe on our liberties. And Facebook and Twitter and Google and the rest of them are not exempt from this. So this, at least, regardless of what the Supreme Court says, they may not ever get there. They may not ever find that. But at least we're going to see this continue to be discussed in the court of public opinion, which is why I'm happy about it, because there needs to be an effort here to show these people that there are consequences when you do this. And the fact that this is going to be in a federal district court for the Southern District of Florida, that means that this lawsuit is going to be going on for some time, and every day, just like the Democrats are going to do to beat the drum about, the insurrection or about the Russians or about whatever hoax that they're, promulgating any particular day, Donald Trump and the right every day are going to be able to keep just rubbing big tech's face's nose in their un-American activities, which is a good thing, which makes me excited. So let's see what's going on here. Now, before we start, I don't actually have a copy of the lawsuit in this video. So if you're watching for that, I didn't get it today. My understanding is this was filed today, so it's going to hit the court docket at some point, and then I will get a copy of it, and we'll look through it because I want to do a deeper dive. We actually may take a whole show on that one. We'll see, because I think it is a very important issue. And this is going to come back again the second time around, right? This is not a done deal. If we think that Twitter and Facebook and Google were all just like, oh, it was only because of Donald Trump and we're never going to do that again. Yeah, right. Okay, we've got 2022 midterms coming up, 2024 after that. Donald Trump's probably going to be right back in the pack again. And so they're going to have to revisit this. So now's the time to start going after these people, right? I'm not a civil lawyer. I'm not a class action lawyer, but I can tell you, I think it's worth the effort to bring these cases in court, and let's let this unfold in the court of public opinion, as well as the court of law. Let's see what they have to say for themselves and how they explain this, because I can tell you people like me are going to be talking about this a lot and making sure that somebody with some effort, some heft to him, like Donald Trump and the people behind him, have some energy as they bring this, because I think it is very important. If we lose our speech, we lose the ability to fight back at all. We can't talk anymore. And that means that you just accept whatever your overlords mandate for you. Okay, so let's get into the actual story here. Over from the Epoch Times, Trump announces a major class action lawsuit against Twitter, Facebook, and Google. He announced Wednesday he is filing lawsuits against all of those people. They suspended his social media accounts 6 months ago after the January 6th Capitol incident. Speaking from his property in Bedminster, New Jersey, Trump and his team said the lawsuits are about protecting the First Amendment right to free speech. They argued that his rights were denied when the 3 big tech companies banned him. Trump described the major lawsuits as a very beautiful development. I agree with that. To protect free speech, he says the suits are going to be filed in the U.S. District Court, so that's a federal court in the Southern District of Florida. They're going to ask a judge to order an immediate halt to social media companies alleging shadow banning, censoring, blacklisting, and canceling of people who express political viewpoints outside of the mainstream. Here is Donald Trump out there today. We've got former president. He's at the Trump National Golf Club over in New Jersey. He announced a lawsuit. And so let's listen in and see what he has to say.
Thank you very much, Brooke. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. I just want to say that I stand before you this morning to announce a very important and very beautiful, I think, development for our freedom and our freedom of speech. And that goes to all Americans.
Wait.
Today, in conjunction...
Wait, is that not playing?
With the American...
Was that not playing? Was that audio not playing? I think I just took a big gulp. All right, so...
The First Policy Institute, I'm filing as the lead class...
All right, so I'm not sure if the audio is playing.
Representative.
I can't tell if the audio is playing. I apologize. I couldn't tell if that audio is playing. Trump came out and he said specifically that he announced what I just read, essentially. So let's carry on with the rest of the story. I apologize for that. Trump's lawyers said the lawsuit will focus on provisions in the Section 230, which they argued was created in the 1990s to protect children from harmful online content. The way the big tech firms currently use the law as a shield, he says, is not what they intended to do. He said they're not immune anymore. So this is coming from Pam Bondi. We're going to take a look at the AFPI, which is the America First Priorities Institute, here in a second. So Pam Bondi is on that team. Meanwhile, former president also appeared to the mainstream media. Trump described mainstream narratives around Republicans wanting to defund the police, the Russian collusion claims, and COVID-19 is false. So by throwing people off the internet, basically we couldn't discuss any of those things. During his news conference on Wednesday, he accused the federal government of using Facebook, Twitter, and Google as a de facto censorship arm during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is exactly what I was saying. You know, it's sort of the government knows they can't do certain things, so they outsource it to these different third parties like Facebook, and they do the censoring because the U.S. government can't do it. All right, so now we know that COVID-19 sort of emerged as a new theory that maybe it did escape from a lab. Earlier this year, Joe Biden said many members of the U.S. intelligence community now view the theory as viable. So, you know, if this stuff were allowed to be talked about back then, would more lives have been saved? If we talked about different treatment therapies and different ideas about how to handle this thing, could the policies have been different? And maybe that would have been better for society. Who knows? We won't know because all of that speech was silenced. So Donald Trump is now filing this lawsuit, and he's backed by a pretty hefty organization. I want to show you what's going on here. This is the AFPI, the American First Policy Institute. And if we go over to their website, we're going to see here that they tell us that they are a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan research institute. And I always like to look at a place's, principles or values or their mission or whatever their statement is. And here they define it for us. They say our guiding principles are liberty, free enterprise, national greatness, American military superiority, foreign policy engagement in the American interest, and the primacy of American workers, families, and communities. That sounds pretty good to me. Sounds pretty reasonable. All pretty good concepts there if you happen to like America, which I do. Now, I want to show you who's on this team, right? Because we've got some pretty Some pretty significant names on here. You may recognize some of these. We got Linda McMahon. She's chairman of the board. We've got Larry Kudlow. He's over, I think, on Fox Business. And then the Honorable Brooke Rowland. So we're going to hear from her, and we're also going to hear from Pam Bondi. We have these two people who are a part of this organization that are helping sort of Trump file this lawsuit. And so she's the chairman of the Constitutional Litigation Partnership. So that's Pam Bondi. And then Brooke Rollins is the president and the CEO. We've got David Bernhardt over here, Josh Campbell. He's a constitutional lawyer. We've got Jack Brewer over here, Center for Opportunity. You'll recognize some of these other names. Let's see who else. We got a retired Lieutenant General over here. We have Catherine Cipher. None of these people really stand out, but over here, you may recognize this guy. This is the Honorable John Ratcliffe, right? He was the former Director of National Intelligence, and so he's a part of this organization. You may also recognize this fellow over here. This is Rick Perry, the Honorable Rick Perry, former governor of Texas. Now he's for the Center for Energy Independence. He's the chairman over there, and he's also sort of a part of this organization. So some other people, maybe you recognize, maybe you don't, but that is the AFPI, and they gave a statement today. They're telling us what this is all about, and here is their press release. They say that the America First Policy Institute, they applaud the class action by Donald Trump and other brave patriots representing Americans who've had their First Amendment rights violated by people like Facebook, Zuckerberg, Twitter, Dorsey, Google, and Sundar Pichai. Is, I think, how Trump said it. Protected by an outdated and misinterpreted Section 230, these elites and their firms ride roughshod over some of the most fundamental American rights: the right to speak, the right to be heard, the right to democratic representation. This lawsuit is not the end of that fight. It is the beginning. It's a fight that AFPI is committed to seeing through. AFPI will continue to support everyday Americans' efforts to hold big tech accountable. Every American can share their personal stories of big tech censorship or sign up for updates on these historic efforts to protect their First Amendment freedoms. Where do you go if you want to do that? If you're listening in the audience and you want to go participate in that, takeonbigtech.com, right? This is a class action lawsuit. So they want everybody to go on there. They created a website called Take On Big Tech. So if you want to go check that out, if you're somebody who's been censored or demonetized, then maybe you go over there and you just sort of, let them know what happened. Maybe we'll do that. So let's take a look at two of the leaders here who are part of this organization. Of course, right here is Brooke L. Rollins, president and CEO of AFPI. So this is her. This is over from Wikipedia. So she was Donald Trump's domestic policy counsel, or the director of that council, from May 24 to January 2021 for under Donald Trump, age 49. Looks like she's over from Texas. And so she says there's not much precedent for an American president, sitting president, taking major media corporations to court. He's not sitting now. Nor is there much precedent for an American president engaging the judiciary to shape the landscape of American freedoms after his presidency. President Trump often remarked that if big tech is out to get him, it's because they're out to get the American people. And he was just standing in the way. The actions of the big tech firms we're taking to court illustrate the point perfectly. What they've done, what they've wrought in the past few years, staggers the imagination. All Americans need Donald Trump to win, not for what it will mean for him, but what it will mean for every American man, woman, or child. Okay. So I am certainly appreciative of their perspective. I think the free speech issue is sort of bigger than Donald Trump. Sounds like she's, advocating for Donald Trump to sort of, to win or something. But I think that the bigger issue, of course, is free speech. Now, statement from, not that I don't want Donald Trump to win. I mean, I think that there's a problem there, right? If you start making this about, only about Donald Trump, if you start saying that, this is just, we're mad that Donald Trump didn't win, that's the wrong issue. That's not a winning issue. The winning issue is free speech. The winning issue is no censorship. The winning issue is free expression, free association, American ideals. And if you fight for those things, as a natural consequence, the person who is the symbolic embodiment of that, Donald Trump, he gets the benefits as well. But if you flip that equation, if you make this about Donald Trump first and free speech second, okay. I mean, I guess it's still a good fight, but we want to make sure be careful there that this is about free speech, which is the stronger argument. Because you'll lose a large number of people if you just say, well, it's only about Donald Trump. Because certainly there are moderates, or there are people who are populists, or there are, standard Republicans, or even Democrats or liberals who are disgusted about some of the censorship, right? The censors are always the bad guys, always. So you might win some people over to that side of the argument, including judges, including, maybe some people even from within big tech itself, if it's about free speech. But if it becomes about, if it becomes too politically ideological, that becomes a problem. Same thing that happened with some of the justice reform stuff. Remember when Black Lives Matter came about, and now it's morphed into this entire, Marxist ideological group that has virtually nothing to do with criminal justice reform. Don't want that to happen here. Who else do we have? This is Pam Bondi. She is a constitutional litigation partner over at AFPI. She says, things have changed over the past several years, and the First Amendment rights of all Americans are on the line in this case. The law and the Constitution are on our side. America is the great country that it is because our Constitution protects our freedoms, including freedom from censorship. This lawsuit ensures that those rights are properly defended. Over here, you can see that she, it looks like, was the Attorney General for Governor Rick Scott, and 37th Attorney General over in Florida, I believe that is. Pamela Jo Bondi, she's a Republican and also comes from Florida, University of Florida and Stetson. So that is two ladies who are helping lead the charge on this thing, which is great. And you'll notice that we don't really recognize any of these people. These are not the same impeachment lawyers. These are not the same election litigation attorneys either. These are new people, and they have a big organization behind them. And so we'll wrap this up before we get some questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. But I want to finish over from the Epoch Times. It says, since leaving office, Trump has opted to release statements. He did not sign up on any social media sites like Parler or Getter, and he isn't sure if he'll join Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube if the lawsuit is successful. He announced a legal effort that is supported by America First, and he wants thousands of other people to join him by going to Take On Big Tech. And Google, Facebook, and Twitter did not immediately respond to requests for comments on Wednesday. So, okay, so let's see what's going on over at the chat, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Let's see what's going on in here. We've got Joe Snows here. Want to know says, what I like about Facebook is I'll keep your ad revenue for myself if I don't like what you say. So Facebook is, yeah, you can hang out here and certainly run your ads. We'll keep all of that money, but you can't say certain things, right? That's a little bit interesting. We have Nadarb says, go back over to YouTube to somebody, I think. Relic Hunter says, free speech is America. Doesn't America enter all the countries so they can give people democracy and free speech? Well, that's a nice idea. I'm not sure that that's the underlying motivation for much of our foreign policy, but I think they tell us that it is, right? Spreading American democracy around. We have Three Girlies says they are thinning the patriotic herd. I believe that 90% of our military is patriotic. Top brass apparently is not. Okay, we have, yeah, that's a good comment, but I don't think that was for me. That was for Thunder. Want to Know says Joe Snow is pretty good. He was ready for that one. The internet is designed. Let's see. Any other questions? Let's see. So there's a lot of activity going on over there in the locals chat. A lot of activity. And I'd invite you to go on over there and check that out. We're going to wrap up here for the day, but a lot of good conversations taking place over there at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Of course, that is our community, our home away from home over there. So I'd invite you to go check that out. And of course, if you happen to know anybody in the state of Arizona who needs help with a criminal case, whether it's you or somebody you know or love, we would love the opportunity to help. We're very good at what we do. We have, some fun on the show. We can get a little bit goofy at times. But when people need help, when they're facing criminal charges, when the system is set against them, we can spring right into action and aggressively make sure that we get the results that you deserve. We have a framework for doing it. We have a whole team of people who are passionate about it. We would love the opportunity to help. Our phone number is 480-787-0394. We're online at www.rrlawaz.com. You can take a picture of that QR code with your phone. You can go to our website. We have free case evaluations. You can even schedule online. We are happy to help and ready and standing by. If you're not interested or don't need legal services, then maybe you're interested in some informational offerings. Of course, at gumroad.com/Robert Gruler, I invite you to check out my law enforcement interaction training, a 2.5-hour course where we're talking about the 1, 2, 3 rule for dealing with the police. Very easy framework for hopefully police interactions that never happen. But it's better to know it and not need it than it is to need it and not know it. Ugh. So make sure you go check that out. Want to give a big welcome and a big shout out. We got some great new members over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. So they just signed up. Let's give a big welcome to Copper Lobo. Welcome to you, Copper. We got Justice Obsessed is in the house. I think I am too, my friend. We have at Chop, who just joined us, which is the Capitol Hill something or other. Good to see you, Chop. We got Jay Heath 5150 in the house. MN Coconut, welcome to you. We have Random Graham who signed up, and we have Ba Aloha in the house. Good to see you, Ba Aloha. We have The Last Villain signed up. We have Hal Scion Blue is in the house, and then we had 2 people who signed up for the yearly plan, which is very much appreciated. That means you're going to be with us for some time. That the one Florida man who we talked about yesterday signed up for the yearly. Good to see you. And then Realtor Patty 14 was a monthly, and then now is a yearly. And we just saw you, Realtor Patty. I know I heard you had a little bit of a trouble sort of updating the card over there. I passed that information along over to the team at Locals, and we'll see if they can, kind of fix that so that's not such a hassle anymore. But we're glad you made it back. And if you want to check that out, of course, head on over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Very inexpensive membership, and of course, you do support the show. When you do that, as we know, we are demonetized here, have been for some time. I submitted my reapplication on March 5th, and they said that we'd hear about it in 30 days on March 5th. So we'll still keep waiting, I guess. But there's a lot of good reasons to go on over there at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. One of the best is because we have a monthly Zoom meetup coming up on Saturday, July 24th, 2021 from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern time, where we get on Zoom, and your cameras can be on, your cameras can be off, totally up to you. Won't be offended. If your camera's off, I might call you an undercover FBI agent, though. But I mean that with love and affection. But it's a lot of fun over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We're going to have a registration link as the date nears a little bit, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody over there. All right, so that is it for me. Let's just give a couple final bit of farewells. We've got Soul Viking in the house, and TOS, and Want to Know, and Relic Hunter all over in the chat. I'm going to say farewell to everybody over there and to the rest of you. We're going to be back here same time, same place tomorrow at 4 p.m. Arizona time, 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Central, and 7 p.m. 7 p.m. on the East Coast. And for that one Florida man, everybody else, have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.